Let's say you're an ancient Roman dude sitting all by yourself with nothing to do. If you wanted to hang out with your ancient Roman buddies, where would you go? Maybe down to the amphitheater to watch a few fights. Perhaps you'd swing by the local fast food restaurant for a dinner of duck and a couple games of dice. Or you might head over to the good old Roman baths, strip naked and hang out with your bros, who'd also be naked. Now, when you hear the word baths, a few things probably pop into your mind, and they likely all revolve around keeping clean. But the truth of the matter is that, at least according to some, what you should be thinking of are fleas, and lice, and bedbugs, and tapeworms and human waste, along with lots of flexing and grunting and pickpockets sneaking and skulking in the shadows. And of course, we can't forget the sausages. Yes, sausages. We're about to take a look around the baths of ancient Rome, complete with slightly more AI-generated video than either one of us is comfortable with, but hey, I'm doing my best here considering most of them now look like this. So you really want a tour? First, I'm gonna need you to sign a liability waiver because I can't be held responsible for anything that may happen. Then you'll need to pop in your earplugs, strap on your hazmat suit, and be sure to keep an eye on your pockets because, well, you'll see. If we're going to explore the baths of ancient Rome and all their particles of poop, we're gonna need a tour guide. So here he is, Seneca. He was a Roman philosopher and playwright who left behind many a quote you'd probably come across in someone's Instagram stories like,
"A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials."
And you could probably say he was a pretty relaxed kind of guy. You see, Seneca was a follower of a type of philosophy we call Stoicism. Most tend to think that means something along the lines of a state of emotionless calm, and, well, I'm not going to get into explaining it all in a video where we're about to discuss Roman poo, but that's only somewhat accurate. For the sake of this tale, let's just say Seneca was highly concerned with lofty thoughts along the lines of how to live the best life possible. And you know what else he thought about? Baths. Why? Because he
absolutely fucking hated them.
I'll explain why here in a second, but one thing you should know is that although I'll mainly be showing you little baths like this one in Pompeii, baths were undoubtedly everywhere in the Roman Empire. I guess they were a bit like the ancient equivalent of Subway, but probably less clean. Aside from the small baths, big cities like Rome had big-time baths. And our good friend Seneca actually lived near one of these. Sadly, they're all in ruins today, but this gives you an idea of what they might have once looked like. So imagine Seneca living in his apartment near the baths, trying to focus, trying to work, and all he can manage to do is write a letter to a buddy complaining about how much he hates him. I do want to be fair here and say the main point of Seneca's words about the baths regard the importance of being able to calm your mind and tune out distractions. But man, this guy rips the hell out of these baths.
Beshrew me if I think anything more requisite than silence for a man who secludes himself in order to study. Imagine what a variety of noises reverberates about my ears.
We'll hear more from Seneca in a minute because he's an exceptionally eloquent whiner. But we should probably just go ahead and get to the poop for now, because we all know that's why you're here. The ancient Romans took a lot of pride in being clean, being advanced enough to control water with aqueducts and flush the streets of animal poop. Pompeii has these stepping stones all over the place so you could avoid actually putting your feet where the horses were. And here's part of a notice posted in the Roman city of Herculaneum, which sat near Pompeii.
Anyone who wants to throw excrement in this place is warned that it is not allowed.
So they certainly had a concept of what was clean and what wasn't. And of course, aside from not flinging poop in certain areas, the Romans would bathe. They'd bathe a lot, rubbing themselves with oil, meandering through the baths, scraping the oil off, getting a massage, dousing themselves in perfume. But Roman baths also had all manner of loathsome substances that would probably make most of you vomit. Yes, even tapeworms, those nasty parasites that were possibly spread through the Romans' use of garum, a sauce made in factories out of uncooked fermented fish. Now, I'm certainly no expert on parasites or ancient sauces, and some of you might say, no way, garum was totally clean and delicious. But here's an actual study on it, written by a guy from Cambridge who leads something called the Ancient Parasites Laboratory, so no fair leaving comments about how you think garum gets a bad rap. Depending on the size of the Roman baths, you'd find yourself chilling or warming with some of your bros in a large tub or giant pool. And obviously that pool didn't have chlorine. Some of the big ones were flushed out every day, but others relied on slaves to empty them with buckets, and no telling how often that happened. One way or another, the point I'm trying to make is that every time you went down to the Roman baths, you and your buddies might be lounging in bacteria soup. I mean, whatever was on somebody's body probably ended up floating in here. And despite how we tend to think of the Romans as bringing civilization and sanitation to the lands they conquered,
what have the Romans ever done for us?
There's evidence that as far as some parasites and diseases go, things actually got worse. Our friend who wrote about the fish sauce thinks that maybe because these things tend to flourish in warm, wet environments. But at least some Romans were aware of how incredibly disgusting baths could be. A guy named Celsus wrote a piece called On Medicine where he said, "Bathing too while the wound is not yet clean is one of the worst things to do. For this makes the wound both wet and dirty, and there is a tendency for gangrene to occur." So yeah, gross. Know what else Roman baths were? Loud. I mean, they'd be packed with people all day long, and can you even hear me right now? Okay, that's better. People were reading, eating, napping, exercising, and doing God knows what else in there. We actually have evidence of some of this based on trash that's been excavated. I don't know about you, but I'd prefer not to bathe next to some large Roman senator who's gobbling down handfuls of pork. What, you think that wouldn't happen? They had vendors selling food right outside the baths, and it wasn't unusual for people to spend hours inside. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that a guy would have little streams of grease running down his face, creating a nice oily sheen on the surface of the water. But Roman baths weren't just about bathing. They were basically community centers, many filled with massive sculptures like this, and complete with libraries and even rooms for poetry readings. No word on whether or not Seneca showed up to read some of his bath time whining. He may not have complained about the filth, but let's hear a bit of what he has to say about all this noise caused by these filthy folks crammed together.
So picture yourself the assortment of sounds which are strong enough to make me hate my very powers of hearing. When your strenuous gentleman, for example, is exercising himself by flourishing leaden weights. When he is working hard, or else pretends to be working hard, I can hear him grunt. And whenever he releases his imprisoned breath, I can hear him panting in wheezy and high-pitched tones. Or perhaps I notice some lazy fellow, content with a cheap rub-down, and hear the crack of the pummeling hand on his shoulder, varying in sound according as the hand is laid on flat or hollow. Then perhaps a professional sports commentator comes along, shouting out the score. That is the finishing touch.
Archaeology backs up what Seneca wrote about. Outside, you typically find what's called a palaestra, an area used for exercising. So you'd have people wrestling and boxing and throwing around the discus and probably screaming. Lots and lots of screaming. You sure you want to go in? It's still loud and probably way more gross. But hey, Seneca's here to show us around, so maybe he'll tell you where not to step. So let's imagine we're walking inside. Past the vendors, past the gym rats and their toga tank tops. Wait, did they have toga tank tops? Probably not, but just go with me on this. Roman baths are made up of multiple rooms. The first one you'd enter is what's called the apoditerium. This is the one in Herculaneum. Basically, it's where you'd take your clothes off. You'd pay a small fee outside the door, stroll in, and start stripping. Obviously, you need a place to put your stuff, hence the shelves. You'd put your clothes there, as well as whatever junk you brought with you, your oils and your perfume, your sandals and your oil scraper, and so on. Wealthy people would have a slave come with them to carry all of this, as well as watch over it. As you might expect, Roman baths were a prime spot for sneaky little crooks to lurk around looking for unattended valuables. Here's a line from a Roman schoolbook where a boy leaves his slave in this room.
do not fall asleep on account of the thieves.
Or this, gouged into a piece of metal at the baths in the appropriately named town of Bath in England, where someone's basically delivering a curse. To Minerva, the goddess of Sulis, I have given the thief who has stolen my hooded cloak, whether slave or free, whether man or woman. He is not to buy back this gift unless with his own blood. You could also hire a slave at the baths to watch your stuff, called a capsarius. And the really wealthy people would show up with a Bieber-sized entourage to show off how many slaves they had. I don't know if Justin Bieber would have an entourage at a bathhouse, but probably. Seneca actually mentions the risks of visiting the baths as he continues his rant.
Add to this the arresting of an occasional roisterer or pickpocket, the racket of the man who always likes to hear his own voice in the bathroom, or the enthusiast who plunges into the swimming tank with unconscionable noise and splashing.
So here in the Apoditarium of Herculaneum, you find a basin called a labrum, kind of a birdbath-looking thing where you'd wash your hands. There used to be another on the platform in the corner for washing your feet. Whether this made any difference when it came to the lice and the tapeworms, I'll leave to you. From here, you could go into the tepidarium, kind of a warm sauna room with a heated floor, and in some cases, heated walls. The Romans were pretty good at using stoves and boilers to warm things up. Here in the tepidarium of Pompeii, you can see a brazier, also used to help keep the room warm. And there was also the caldarium with its hot baths and the frigidarium with its cold baths. There were usually duplicates of each for men and women. Most baths had some combination of these different rooms depending on how big they were. Gazing upon these places now, they certainly look clean, and obviously there aren't hundreds or thousands of sweaty naked people stumbling about. And here's a public bathroom from the baths in the city of Ostia Antica near Rome, so just take a second and think about what this place must have smelled like. And we've even found the remains of fleas and lice on ancient Roman combs, to say nothing of the parasite eggs which were surely floating around in some of these places. Along with the sausage juice.
Imagine the hair plucker with his penetrating shrill voice, for purposes of advertisement, continually giving it vent and never holding his tongue except when he is plucking the armpits and making his victim yell instead. Then the cake seller with his various cries, the sausage man, the confectioner, and all the vendors of food hawking their wares, each with his own distinctive intonation.
See? Sausage man? I told you they were gobbling sausages in there. As for our wonderful tour guide, Mr. Seneca, you probably think he left his apartment as soon as his lease was up, surely hammering out a nasty review online. But the truth is, he never quite escaped the role baths played in his life. You see, in addition to writing plays and ruminating on philosophy, he was also involved in politics. He spent some time as a senator and was later an advisor to the Roman Emperor Nero. Nero ended up accusing Seneca of being involved in a plot to assassinate him, which he probably wasn't, but nevertheless, he was ordered to take his life, which he did, in a bathtub. It may not have been tapeworms or gym rats that did him in, but I suppose none of us can truly escape the horrors of the baths of the Roman Empire.
Beshrew me if you don't, like and subscribe and things, because that would be really bad of you, or something.